Not here today, Bill McMillan, who's absent for, I think, medical reasons, and Cliff Williams, who represents industry. I think both actually represent industry, energy industry. Cliff is out of town on business, he couldn't be here. I'll just make a few comments to the public members who are here. We welcome your presence. I assume most of you are from the WIN working group. Some of you are public outside that group. I want to remind you that you will all have, you on the WIN working group will have an opportunity to comment formally and in writing to whatever draft report this group comes up with. Because we're advisory to you, and then you're advisory to DELEG. So you will have opportunity to comment at some point later. Last time when we had public members here, quite a few members were present. We didn't really conduct the normal business of the committee. Today we're going to need to insist that we do that business to the best of our ability to get to the point of finalizing, or at least get toward completion of our draft report, at which point you can certainly comment. I think we're going to pass around, we decided to pass around this sheet to have you sign your name, if you will, your affiliation, if any. You can not feel pressed to sign affiliation, but do sign your name and put an asterisk or a check mark by your name if you know already that you want to comment at the end of the meeting. That way we'll get an idea of how many of you might want to comment. I realize that many of you might want to comment only after hearing what we say here in our meetings. So I think it's also fair to tell you that this subcommittee, because it is a subcommittee, is not subject to the Open Meetings Act. So we're not formally obliged to have an open meeting. That's not true of larger committees, but it is true apparently of subcommittees. We would especially request that we not be recorded. I know the last time we recorded it came up on YouTube in 8 installments. I realize that we ought to be public about our affairs, and we're not going to make any attempt not to record, but we prefer not to be recorded. We feel that we've not done a great job of keeping our minutes formally documented. That's because our understanding from the very outset was that we didn't really have to take minutes if we had other business or specific business that we wanted to accomplish, which was this draft report, that our work would be reflected. The substance of our work will be reflected in that report. We're now in draft report 6, and since about the noon hour today, Ken, who's our co-chair of the committee, who's sitting beside me, Ken Rosenman, has drafted what he considers a sort of compromise report that I think I'm going to suggest that our group, our committee, consider as a starting point for our discussion today. So if you will, please hold your comments till toward the end of the meeting. We will allow some time for those comments. Since Ken submitted the most recent document or report, I'd like to start by asking Ken to just summarize the major reasons for that revision and what he would expect it to accomplish.
Okay, so does everyone each? Yes. And do you have a copy? So I did not think that so to me the major issue that was still under discussion was the recommended noise level around wind turbines, and I did not think that the group was going to come to a consensus. And so what I was attempting to draft was multiple, what the possible noise levels could be and the rationale for each of them. And so that was the document I circulated, since I was in favor of a particular one. The rationale for that is longer than some of the others, but this was just meant to be a draft, and certainly rationale could be increased for the other DBAs. And since we don't actually writing regulations, but making recommendations that municipalities can follow, I didn't see that we had to come up with a particular one, and I didn't think we were going to be able to, so that's why I drafted this. And I guess if the concept follows, I mean, we can always work on the wording, but that was the concept. might be acceptable to the group.
I support the concept. I think it's very well written, and I'd like to have some discussion about, in particular, the units and the noise level. And I don't know if now's the appropriate time to talk about that.
We discussed earlier the concept of making some data available from the Peterson et al. Study, 2009 study, that reported the number of people annoyed by noise. John has made a comment that's reflected in draft 6 that he doesn't believe annoyance per se is an adequate foundation for public policy. John, you can speak to that if you will. I don't know if I represented your view very well, but.
Well, you know, in response to Ken's proposal, he may be right that we can't come up with a consensus recommendation. In the ideal world, we would come up with a consensus recommendation. As you know, representing GLREA, I recommended 50 dBA at the residence, a nighttime measurement. And Ken has proposed 40 dBA.
And I would agree with that.
And you've agreed with that, okay. Should we, does that mean that you don't have a position at this time with respect to an actual level, or do you actually prefer that we have just a discussion of different levels of the rationale?
I like Ken's write-up.
The approach?
I like that approach, but
Okay.
if we're going to say 40 dBA, then I just want to make sure that we're being clear about what the averaging period is for that 40 dBA. Is it an L max? If it is, I don't think that matches the World Health Organization. And I think it would be helpful if we could get that recorded in better detail.
It's hard to operationalize the World Health Organization number because it's averaged over a year essentially, and it's impossible, I think, in the real world to really get a measure that actually reflects that particular number or value. Ken's allusion, his reference to 40 as being the minimum as a limit, is based on, I think, as he said, on the World Health Organization recommendation, which is we've talked about last time and before that. The World Health Organization does not even talk about wind turbines or wind turbine noise. It talks about transportation noise, maybe industrial noise, and there's other kinds of community noises. But I think when it came up with its recommendations about limits on noise levels, it did not have some data that was has been available to us since then. A lot of people have said that, I think several researchers have shown that wind turbine noise is different from other noises in that it contains more low frequencies than these other sounds. So the reason I would go with 40 is because, defend 40 is because if 40 is a good limit in the eye of the World Health Organization to which to limit noise for other kinds of noises, and low frequency noise is even more infrasound than these other noises, it might, and based on the kind of complaints we know they're out there about wind turbine noise, I think 40 is certainly a reasonable number. But Ken has also, I think, used 55 as the upper limit, which we currently have. So it's like somebody said earlier, maybe establishing a range would be the way to go, but in essence, as you all know, I think Ken and I don't collude on these things, by the way. We work at the same university, but we do not talk to each other about what each one prefers. We came up with these numbers, this number on our own, I think, and we tend to think that health is probably not well protected by levels greater than about 40 or 45. And
to clarify, though, are the two of you proposing for us to adopt their standard, which is an annual average? The reason I ask that is we've had some discussion on this in the past.
We discussed that.
You know, when the initial siting guidelines established 55 dBA at the property line, it was a maximum value. And you know, when you think in terms of average over the course of a year,
Right.
It could have been, we don't even know what it could have been at that standard. It could have been 50, it could have been 45, it could have been 40, because they're such different numbers. But by picking that standard, are we also saying it should be an annual average?
No, I think Jerry in draft 6, was it? But even maybe that may not be enough detail. It talks about an applicable noise level would be that the noise not exceed 40 dBA and the LEQ 8 where night is defined as the 8-hour period between 11 and 7 a.m. And outside is defined as a measurement point outside a window on a wall of an inhabited residence facing the nearest tower. But I suppose that could even be defined more, because that would imply instantaneous any second, and maybe it should be time weighted over some period of time, which is not in that.
I don't think we use the term not to exceed, do we, or do we?
Yeah, it actually says not exceed.
Okay, so not to exceed.
But, you know.
Over a period of time, like 10 minutes, or over a period of time that might be applicable to enough time to wake somebody up.
But averaged, each reading taken is
Yeah, there might
averaged
be
over
more
the
than one
8-hour
reading.
period.
Yeah, or over an 8-hour period, and that be more than 1 8-hour period.
So
We haven't,
that's-
gotten that specific about it at this point.
But are we taking a number from WHO and then kind of converting it? And what's the basis for that? Because an annual average is a lot different than an average over nighttime.
The DB work in a strange kind of way. Logarithmic numbers work very strangely. And I tried, as I earlier, I tried the formula that equates longer periods to shorter periods and vice versa. It just does not work.
Yeah.
It violates some of the basic tenets of the, I think, the way in which that formula should be applied. So that didn't work, and so I'm just trying to make it more, it could be 45 perhaps, I don't know. I really don't know. But it won't be much different from 40. It might be 42.5. I mean, that's kind of a number that I've seen actually used in some of the literature based on statistical analyses. So we get deadlocked every time we talk about numbers.
Well, what is the current for the 55? Is that a maximum? Or is that an instantaneous maximum? What is?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's the same issue. You need to find it in the previous
Right,
document.
exactly.
Always an
It
issue.
was not to exceed, but you're right, it wasn't defined when it would be measured and how. And
Right, so it's the same issue.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So-
And it has some significance, I think.
Right.
Well, because you seem to be indicating, Jerry, too, you know, if you look at what WHO has suggested, you know, and you convert it into the actual measurements protocols we're thinking of, it's probably a higher number, right? Because you mentioned 42
Somewhat
and
higher.
45 maybe.
Somewhere between 40 and 45. I don't think it would be more than 40. I can't really tell you honestly.
And I agree with Julie in the sense that, you know, I like Ken's write-up. The only thing I would, well, I have a couple suggestions. One is that we make it real clear that the 40 dBA is an annual average, and that has some significance, so that people understand what they're reading. Because the natural tendency for anybody is to basically say, oh, that's a maximum you can never exceed. And WHO has said you can never exceed 40 dBA, and they haven't said that. They basically,
So there would be times, if it's a yearly average, it would be exceeded, obviously.
61 night,
How much could that
20
be
another night.
is not calculable in my estimate. I can't.
Well, when you say it's not calculable, it's not scientifically, you can't, I remember your
I can't make any
equation.
given formulas that come up with any reasonable sounding answer.
But so what you're saying applies to any recommendation you make. So we need, and I think it's what Julie was saying, we need something that better defines how this is measured, and that would apply
Yeah.
whether we use 55, 45, 50, 45, or 40.
Well, and I also think we need to clarify what the World Health Organization was recommending, so people understand that while that's the basis of the recommendation, it's different than what is actually being suggested. Because what is being suggested as a way to measure that is different in an important way.